Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kersner.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kersner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now, and I want to thank you wholeheartedly for joining us. The topic for today's podcast is Laugh with the Present Moment, and it is my pleasure and honor to introduce today's guest, StevieAnne Petitt. StevieAnne is a conscious comedian and quite an amazing woman. I'd like to have StevieAnne talk a little bit about where she came from and what she's been up to, and then we can go forward on some of the projects she's currently working on. So StevieAnne, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Paul.
You're welcome. I think my audience will be very interested to hear about who you are and where you've come from.
All right, cool. Well, I guess we all have stories to some degree, and they serve us for a while, long enough to come into the present moment. So my story, I suppose, is that I grew up in foster and group homes after some childhood trauma that took place inside the family. And from there, I just kind of grew up in the system. I moved on into the military for 12 years. And then just 3 years ago, I departed from the military after I had 2 children. I wanted to spend more time with them. And I started my spiritual journey. And 3 years ago, I moved here to Phoenix area, Tempe, Arizona, to pursue life coaching. I actually served as a military police officer for those 12 years, but I did a lot of mentoring. And I found that life coaching was the closest thing to that in the civilian sector, so that's what I chose to do. And SWIHA, by far, the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, they had, Google Analytics on lockdown. Like, they were number one, well known for healing arts. So I came here 3 years ago for life coaching, and man, that was all she wrote. I started to, life coaching focuses so much on the present moment and helping people just identify what it is about their lives, what their gifts are, what they've been graced with, finding the grace in their stories and the trials and tribulations they've been through, and then learning how to share them in a loving and profitable way. So that's exactly what happened to me. About a year into my 2-year program, I started to work on assignments that the school asks you to do, deep, dark, heavy stuff. And I found that it was easier for me to deal with and witness and process even my childhood and my adolescence by using humor. So I would use comedic metaphors. I'm really well known in the community for comparing egos to farts. And it's just the idea that if we were as mindful about expressing our opinions as we were our flatulence, the world would be less toxic and less offensive. And that took off. I realized my gifts and my graces have always been comedy and humor. I was always witty in the group homes and foster homes. That was something that people liked about me. And it was just one of the gifts. It was one of the things that God gave me to allow me to push through. And so yeah, that very quickly became my awareness around my gifts and graces. And then I used that in a loving and profitable way by writing a book. I got endorsed by a #1 New York Times bestselling author. I took the content to the stage, and I realized that in addition to all the spiritual members that would come out and support me, which, even to this day, this last Sunday, they did the same thing. They come in bucket loads of people. In addition, the civilian sector, the other people outside of the healing arts spiritual community, they would approach me after my sets, and they would say, that was some really deep stuff, but it was good. It was funny. I get it, And so I realized the importance of bringing humor into this human experience and being able to live and laugh with what I like to call the now-ment, the present moment, that life is hilarious. And if we just can witness it as an observer, as opposed to always trying to label and identify and make sense of, it's kind of hilarious. And then once you're laughing at it, you're laughing with it, and you're at peace with it. You find peace with it because you're entertained by this human experience. So I like to reference it the humor experience oftentimes, and try to remember as often as I can in each fleeting moment that that's all I have is this moment. What can I be grateful for, and what can I find humor in? So that's manifest in a lot of different things, and we'll see what happens at the end of this year. Hopefully there's a documentary that's coming out, and to just kind of share the transition from childhood trauma and sexual abuse to childlike wonderment and innocence. And I've found that through laughter. And so it's my mission to lighten up enlightenment and to share that with your audience and everyone else that's willing to listen.
Yeah, I think that from my own personal experience, that laughter can be an amazing presence tool. Whether you feel it's a little contrived or there's actually something there that you can laugh at, it has the ability to shift you out of some past thought and future worry and pull you right into the present moment.
Yes.
It's almost like breathing in the
Yes.
same regard, where, if you start breathing deeply, that helps to anchor you. Well, laughter is very similar.
Right.
Laughter has the ability to anchor you into the present moment. It's something that I've used at times, and I definitely talk to my patients and the people I work with about, what kind of tools can they use. You also talked about going through some tough times, but using laughter as a tool to help deal with it.
Right.
In one of my past podcasts, I think number 9 is acceptance of the present moment.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes.
And so to me, regardless of however the present moment feels, we have to accept that. So what you're saying is that we can not only accept the present moment, but we can laugh at it as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm sure we've all experienced to some degree these moments where everything is going wrong. Have you ever dropped a paper like 4 times in a row, and then you're just thinking in your head like, this is ridiculous? Like, what? You get frustrated at first, right? Because I'm sure the ego's battling with what's wrong with me, and we're identifying with, I feel not good enough. I feel inferior. Why, do I look silly? Are people watching me? And maybe we just keep dropping things, or we're having a hard time picking a penny up from a counter or something multiple times over. It gets to a point where it's so ridiculous that you can't help but laugh. You're like, is this really happening? And so we can even channel that into bigger life events. Like we can look, and that's the thing, is we're looking at, we're not identifying with, we're not getting stuck in, but we're just kind of observing and allowing things to kind of flow through without the ego adding its agenda or label. We're just identifying and witnessing, that was an interesting part of my life, and wow, that was really wild. We scratch our head and we shake our head and nod back and forth, even in like disbelief of what it is that we've witnessed or what it is that we've gone through, and when that happens, it's like you said, if you're truly laughing, like wholehearted laughing, it's no different than, dare I say it, an orgasm, or also the breathing exercises where we're mindful of each inhale and each exhale. Something happens where we're so entertained, we're so involved and with that laughter that stimulated thought can't take place. There's no place for it. There's not room for it. We're lost in laughter, and perhaps even found in laughter, paradoxically, because we're finding who we were all along before all the labels and the identifying is not good enough, and oh my goodness, yesterday's woes and tomorrow's worries, So there's something truly amazing about laughter and a few other unique human experiences we have that they captivate us. They keep us in that present moment, and laughing wholeheartedly, truly laughing, that's my favorite way. Why not?
I've had a chance to watch some of your videos, and I definitely appreciate the humor approach, the lighthearted approach. But you touch upon some very profound topics, some deep, meaningful experiences. And I think watching that makes me understand that there is a place for humor as we go throughout our day. There are times where, yes, things are pretty serious. There are moments that are serious, but there has to be a balance there where,
Absolutely.
We find the humor, we're able to laugh, we're able to let go a little bit. Being present, does mean that there are times where you allow yourself to just be, and sometimes to just be means to just laugh.
Right. And or cry and scream and vent to a safe party. I love all of the work that the holistic arts offer. I love it all. But you're right, it's about balance. And with this spiritual work, oftentimes it can be deep, dark, and heavy. And so if we can balance that and counter that with the ability to kind of lighten it up some and to just laugh at and with the present moment, and like you even mentioned, accepting things as they are and just witnessing it almost as if, you're watching a play take place and you're like, is this for real? This is so silly. And then there's peace there. There's peace in that. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason, when we accept ourselves as we are, it's paradoxically, it doesn't mean that we tolerate ourselves and that we don't desire to change. Something miraculous happens where when we accept ourselves the way we are and when we accept the moment as it is, as it's showing up, it transmutes itself. It's the craziest thing, but it almost instantly, because it's given the opportunity to evolve, because we weren't trying to force it or change it in any way, because we just allowed it to express and show up how it does. After things physically manifest and we just observe how it shows up, it kind of organically evolves, and we didn't need to get our hands dirty. We didn't have to get involved at all. We just simply bared witness. We just divinely witnessed it happening. And if we can laugh at it, I feel like those waves of laughter just help push it along even faster. We're unfazed, So there is certainly a time and place for all sorts of healing modalities and deep work, but we can lighten it up too.
I think there is a dichotomy when it comes to laughter, in the sense where we can use laughter as an escape.
Yes.
Or we can use laughter in the present moment.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing too, is sometimes I think oftentimes we listen to crass humor because it allows us to laugh a little bit, and that's something that we know deep down our bodies naturally want to do. It's what our spirit longs for. But if we can bring a little bit more clean comedy in and out, if we can laugh at ourselves, then ultimately what we're doing is we're giving ourselves a pass, we're forgiving ourselves, we're accepting ourselves, and we're also saying to the rest of our fellow beings, hey, it was me. I had a moment. I'm laughing at my mistake. Certainly I can identify and have compassion for you in your moments because I've witnessed myself act in ways that were kind of silly. And, so by accepting ourselves and by laughing at the present moment and how we are showing up in that present moment, however that is, just being at peace with who we are and when we are in that moment, we give everyone else a pass. We start to have compassion for every single other being that we're co-creating and coexisting with. And it ultimately, I believe, is one of those, energetically speaking, gratitude and laughter and joy. I mean, that's the highest form of receivership. We're so grateful that we have nothing else attracted to us but more to be grateful for. So we find once we get on this bandwagon of laughing with the present moment, that many more things happen that allow us to continue to laugh. And then you have strangers laughing with you, and it feels so foreign but so at home. It's the strangest thing, but I'd say just by being jovial in nature and really embracing the present moment and what's happening and witnessing things evolving around me and looking for the humor, looking for the joy, other people can sense that. And it's been a huge blessing because it's been what has ultimately allowed me to maintain that momentum, because it's become my career. So it's interesting how laughter just brings us all together and then has even allowed me to maintain that and stay in that.
I think some people would be curious to know how you can go from a painful past into a happy present. We have a tendency as human beings to hold on to trauma, to define ourselves and have an identity that's wrapped around it. For the mere fact alone that we just don't want to condone it. We don't want it to ever happen to ourselves. And so I could tell you that, from personal experience, there's a level of acceptance that has to take place.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that, having more comedic approach towards the present moment makes it a lot easier to accept some of those past experiences. Not that we want to condone them, not that we ever want to say that it was okay whatever happened to us. But we have to get to a point where we can understand and accept it and then let it go so that we can fully exist in the here and now.
Yeah. This is I love this question. There's a girlfriend of mine. She and I practiced for a couple of weeks even. It was just an idea that we had, and we were kind of going off on this jovial back and forth sort of joke that we felt like aliens. And, here we are, we were just dropped on Earth in these skin suits, and we're trying to figure out like how this human experience works. And by separating from the human experience just enough to like not identify with what was happening, but just to observe it, we would start to report with one another via text. We'd say, today in my Stevie suit, I learned what it was like to feel embarrassed, And so we started to separate just enough that we could witness and observe the ego kind of sending mind chatter, but we didn't get caught up in the story. It was just the contents. It wasn't who we are. We're the container witnessing the contents flow through. And so I think to some degree, and that took the present moment. We had to be willing to step out of the present moment just enough to realize that we aren't identified with it, that's not our makeup. And we were just, that's part of the human experience. It's experience what it's like to be human. And so, in this moment, I'm learning what it's like to be embarrassed. Someone in this other suit today, they rejected me. And so I learned what it felt like in my Stevie suit today to be rejected, And so somehow I think that was one of the first comedic approaches that me and a girlfriend took, was to just kind of identify and look for, like actively seek the humor in the human experience. And sometimes it takes the metaphor of really seeing this as an experience of what it's like to be human. So however that looks, some people believe in past lives. Well, if this is serving you and this life is, something that you've learned before, or karma that you need to revisit or what have you, well then really put on that story, put on that play and show up. And, people believe their thoughts create their reality, right? I mean, I don't know that I can deny that. Like, that's shown up very much. And maybe it's just perhaps because I believe it so much. But in that truth, I've made it fun. If we can make this place that we're in fun, if we can do as much things as possible that bring us joy, however slight, if we could pencil it in our planner, if we can make the intention to hang out more with people who bring out bliss and joy in our lives, if we can spend time with friends who are willing to go on this journey with us and make it more joyful, that's probably the first step, is to be around like-minded people and finding the people that you ultimately want to spend time with that have that sort of paradigm. And then before long, you're living it up and laughing in the present moment because you're blissed out, sharing it with like-minded people who are also helping you embrace this human experience. So I think the first step is just finding a fun way to even embrace what all of this is about. And that might even be as simple as penciling in the things that bring you joy. Going back to childlike wonderment and innocence. For me, that doesn't include the use of drugs. I'm sober as well. For some people, perhaps that helps them. For me, I like candy. I'm not gonna lie. That's probably my drug of choice. So maybe I've taken the childlike wonderment a bit to the extreme. But I don't know, I find more and more that abstinence for me and sobriety and revisiting jump ropes, and we have board game nights, my friends and I, and it's so innocent and comedic, and it doesn't bear the weight of all these things, our mind chatter that kind of shows up once we transition into like adolescence and adulthood, and we feel like we have to be focused on the future and we've ruined the past. It's just be in the present moment with like-minded people. And I'd say that's got to be one of the first steps. Bring more joy back into your life.
I like that suggestion of just even making a list of the things that make you happy.
Yes. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You touched upon another topic that's something that I speak about often is detaching and becoming the observer. We all have thought streams that are flowing through our heads constantly.
Yeah.
And when we start to look at the thoughts and really understand them for what they are, we understand that 99% of them have nothing to do with the present moment.
Right.
And I'd say 99% of them are not joyful at all.
Right, yeah.
And so it does take concerted effort to detach from that thought stream, to look at it for what it is. As the analogy I like to give, and I'm sure many of the people in the audience have heard it before, is just like clouds in the sky. You just have to let those thoughts kind of float by. But you also have to see the humor in it. It is pretty hilarious that we have this ego that thinks that it's appropriate to stream so many thoughts and memories that don't serve us.
Yeah. Well, and the ego, I don't think it's a bad thing. It's part of the human experience too. It's like an 8-year-old backseat driver, and it's only as good as it is aware of different routes. And it's going to keep taking us on old routes. It's going to tell us which way to go. Its job is to help us navigate between success and safety. It's very reptilian. It's very, survival mentality. And so it serves its purpose. Some of those thoughts it's information, but it's not identity. It's not who we are. So if it's offering something that's insightful, great. But most of the time I find myself just giving my 8-year-old ego a Fisher-Price driving wheel, letting it think that it has control, and then really higher self is like, okay, thank you, ego. We appreciate that you want to keep us between, safety and success. And we would like to, try a new route today. We're going to try something new. And just having these sort of comedic metaphors, maybe even witnessing and seeing in your mind's eye that your ego is having a temper tantrum in a moment, and witnessing that mind chatter and observing it in the present moment. Because here's what's interesting too, and Eckhart Tolle speaks about this in A New Earth. Sometimes the ego, because it thrives on identity, it's even the ego in us, the ego in me, that longs for reaching enlightenment. It's like the ego jumps on that too, like, oh yeah, we got to be superior. We can be superior. We can be enlightened. And I'm like, who's we? So then we realize that really enlightenment is only ever one present moment away. If we continue to say, I'm going to be enlightened, that's really the ego, once again, identifying with something in the future. It's future tripping. And that's okay. It's just the ego's attempt at feeling successful and superior, and that's fine too. And the higher self says, well, let's just be here now. Let's just be here now. And so that's the practice, is every fleeting moment, as often as we can recall, just enjoy being. Like, it's that simple. And so if we can do things that help us, again, revisit that place of laughter where that stimulated thought and that mind chatter, that ego voice is drowned out because we're so lost in laughter, we've got to bring more of that into our lives. However juvenile or adolescent it might seem. A lot of people, they'll coloring mandalas right now are like the in thing. And I don't even think people know why, but really it's speaking to that childlike wonderment before they had all the stresses of tomorrow and the woes of yesterday.
Yeah. StevieAnne, thank you. Thank you so much. This was a really great podcast, just for the sole fact that we're touching upon a subject that we forget as adults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We forget to laugh.
I know.
We forget how funny our realities really are. Because we get so serious, we get so stuck. Mm-hmm. We have such strong judgment of ourselves and of others that we forget that we need to look at life with, like you say, childlike wonder and amazement.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that will allow us to stay in the present moment, because really the present moment is all we have.
That's right.
And then ultimately laughter is one of the ultimate presence tools.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Of course. So if people want to learn a little bit more about you, follow you, get to know you, how would they do that?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'd be honored if they connected with me on Facebook. I'm a huge social media nut. I'm always sharing videos of the process and the progress. So I'm on Facebook as StevieAnne, one word, Petitt, Petitt. And then I have a website as well, StevieAnne.com, and that's ANNE, StevieAnne.com. So yeah, that's, and then if it resonates, whatever. Only if that brings you joy in the present moment, then connect. Otherwise, I'll see you guys out and about, I'm sure. So what an honor. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.